Bom dia a todas e todos que nos assistem. Hoje, a OPAS e a Unicef, em parceria com a Rede IFAM e DEC, realizam esse webinar em comemoração ao Dia Mundial de Proteção ao Aleitamento Materno. Para dar as boas-vindas a vocês que nos assistem, nós teremos a participação do Dr. Léo Neverdin, da Cristina Albuquerque, representante do Unicef, da coordenadora Janine Nani, da Renata Ferreira, da diretora Carlota Aquino e da coordenadora Cláudia Sanchez e da coordenadora Cynthia Ribeiro. Os panelistas do nosso webinar são Dr. Lawrence Brumerstrom, Dr. Marco Arana e Dr. Rodrigo Viana. Todas e todos os nossos convidados e panelistas serão devidamente apresentados ao longo do evento. De antemão, aproveito para saudá-las e saudá-los e agradecer a importante contribuição de vocês nesse momento de celebração e reflexão. Neste encontro, nós iremos debater sobre o impacto da comercialização de substitutos do leite materno nas decisões sobre alimentação infantil, os avanços e desafios da implementação do Código Internacional sobre a comercialização de substitutos do leite materno nos países, que todos conhecem como Código ou Código Internacional. A qualquer momento, vocês podem fazer perguntas pelo chat do YouTube. Temos uma sessão de perguntas e respostas ao final das falas das nossas queridas e queridos convidados. Então, agora eu convido o Dr. Léo Neverdin, chefe de unidade regional da OPAS, para dar as boas-vindas a todos e todas que nos acompanham.
Buenos días, es un gusto estar aquí con ustedes en este día. Entonces, bienvenidos, bienvenidas a todos y a todas a este webinar para celebrar el Día Mundial de Protección de la Lactancia Materna. Hoy tendremos la oportunidad de discutir sobre el impacto de la promoción y publicidad de los sucedáneos de la leche materna en las decisiones sobre la alimentación infantil y los avances y desafíos en la implementación del Código Internacional de Comercialización de Sucedáneos de Leche Materna. Son necesarios esfuerzos renovados para proteger a madres, bebés y familiares de la comercialización inadecuada de sucedáneos de la leche materna, considerando las publicaciones recientes de la OMS. Una sobre una investigación en varios países de la OMS y UNICEF, publicada en 2022, febrero, acerca de la manera en que la industria de los sucedáneos influye en las decisiones sobre la alimentación de los lactantes. Esta investigación demostró que las técnicas que utiliza la industria aumentan las ventas de estos productos, con un gasto mayor a 55.000 millones de dólares americanos cada año para promover los sucedáneos. La otra publicación es una revisión de la evidencia en relación con el alcance y el impacto de las estrategias de comercialización y promoción digitales de sucedáneos de la leche materna. Se ha encontrado que la industria utiliza técnicas poderosas de comercialización digital para alcanzar a las madres e influir en sus decisiones acerca de cómo alimentar a sus bebés. Los resultados de estas dos revisiones hacen aún más importante el monitoreo y evaluación periódicos de la implementación nacional del Código Internacional, de modo que los países puedan fortalecer sus medidas de control de comercialización, incluyendo las técnicas digitales. También se lanzó en esta semana el informe mundial y regional de la situación de la implementación del código, viendo que todavía hay mucho camino por recorrer. El propósito es el responsabilizar a los Estados miembros de la implementación del código en cada país, de acuerdo con lo que en repetidas oportunidades ha señalado en la Asamblea Mundial de la Salud, además de apoyar la abogacía para la promulgación, monitoreo y aplicación del código a nivel del país. Como OPS, Seguiremos apoyando fortalecer las legislaciones en los países y también el monitoreo de la implementación del código, además de apoyo también a la iniciativa Hospitales Amigos del Niño. Entonces, nuevamente bienvenidos a este webinar y que sea de mucho éxito. Gracias.
Muito obrigado, Dr. Léo Neverdin. Convido agora, então, a senhora Cristina Buquerque, chefe da área de saúde HIV do Fundo Nações Unidas para a Infância, UNICEF, para dar as boas-vindas.
Muito bom dia a todos, a todas, buenos dias. Em nome do UNICEF, eu gostaria já de antemão de agradecer essa histórica parceria que temos com a Organização Pan-Americana de Saúde, tanto a nível global, regional, aqui no Brasil também. Estamos muito satisfeitas de estar aqui presente. Eu saúdo todos dessa abertura em nome do senhor Léo e todos os parceiros, né, da OPAS, Anvisa, IDEC, IBFA e do Ministério da Saúde. Vocês sabem que esse tema do aleitamento materno, ele está no DNA do UNICEF, né? E agora a gente vê com os ODS a questão central de um bom início de vida, de possibilidades de desenvolvimento pleno de uma criança, e o dia D, com certeza, vai desde a gestação, mas após o nascimento, na primeira hora, o aleitamento materno. Esse relatório, ele traz as evidências de coisas que nós já, com certeza, tínhamos conhecimento ou suspeitava, né? Ele chama gentilmente o relatório, né, de marketing antiético. Eu acho que foram muito generosos, assim, de classificar só como antiético, porque, na nossa visão, muitas vezes extrapola até a questão da ética, né? E uma vez que o aleitamento materno, ele salva vidas, né? Então, eu queria também colocar aqui, nesse pouco tempo que nós temos, que o UNICEF aqui no Brasil tem trabalhado muito essa questão, né? Nós temos o Guia dos 10 Passos para Alimentação e Hábitos Saudáveis, do nascimento até os 2 anos, que além de estar sendo trabalhado nas unidades básicas de saúde da região da Amazônia Legal do Semiárido, também está sendo utilizado em algumas maternidades brasileiras através da coordenação da nossa parceira. E também eu queria também divulgar, né, um EAD sobre aleitamento materno e alimentação complementar saudável, a iniciativa Unidade Amiga da Primeira Infância, que nós temos em 6 capitais, né, que além do pré-natal, a puericultura foca bastante na questão do aleitamento materno e da alimentação complementar saudável. E, por fim, eu queria dar um spoiler aqui, tá? E já convidar de antemão, dentro em breve, lançaremos uma grande campanha chamada PAPEI, tá? Protagonizada pela artista, cantora, jornalista, compositora Carol Levi, contadora de histórias para crianças, uma produção da Onomatopeia, cuja primeira parte dessa campanha, com vídeos, músicas, áudios, cards, personagens animados e humanos, tem 2 protagonistas, digamos. O vilão, ou a vilã, que é uma lata, que se chama Láctea. E toda a influência que ela tenta passar...
This can tries to influence this pregnant woman, and we also have another character, which is the lunch lady in the school environment. And it is a very creative campaign, a very positive campaign, and it works with this theme in a very sensitive manner, and it will be available on our social networks, and we will very soon be publicizing the launching of this PAPE campaign. Thank you very much. I wish everyone a good day's work.
Muito obrigado, Cristina Albuquerque.
Thank you so much, Cristina Albuquerque. And now I'd like to invite Renata Ferreira from the Coordination of Sanitary Inspection in Anvisa, the National Sanitary Surveillance Agency. Good morning, everyone. First and foremost, I'd like to greet all of the panelists in the name of the PAHO representatives, the WHO representatives, UNICEF representatives, participants from the Ministry of Health, and I'd like to talk about the importance of this event for Brazil and for the world, and the importance of the World Breastfeeding Day, in the very same day where the code for implementation and of the regulation of the breastfeeding of breast milk substitutes. So it's very important to have this day to celebrate how far we have come and what we still need to improve and perfect. So I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for participating in this event. In Brazil, we have the consolidation of the international code based on the norm that we refer to as the Brazilian norm for the commercialization of products for early childhood, and it was created in 1988. It is currently law 11,865, and also a few resolutions by Anvisa and decrees by the Ministry of Health. And in relation to this, we have the national sanitary surveillance system as a guarantee that the norm will fulfill its objective in combating unethical practices in commercializing products that interfere with breastfeeding. So first of all, I like to call upon all of my friends in the National Sanitary Surveillance team to prioritize this type of monitoring and fiscalization. And within the National Sanitary Surveillance Agency, we have a few initiatives about this code. We have many challenges because, as will be seen in the WHO reports regarding the marketing strategies that are used, especially online, and us as people who monitor these tactics, we have many challenges, but we also have very interesting results. Last year, we promoted a course for the fiscalization agents, and this course is available in our online learning platform. And so all fiscalization agents have access to this course, and they can take part in it whenever they want. And the number of people who seek out that course has increased. And ever since the beginning of the year, we have a very innovative program with UNDP to monitor e-commerce platforms. So the goal of this project would be to monitor irregular propaganda and products that are subject to sanitary surveillance. It is a project of a very large scope, and it deals with all products subject to sanitary surveillance, and a company is hired to monitor what we call actives in e-commerce platforms, and we still implement some things related to ANIBECAL during this year, and we have had some very interesting results, such as products that cannot be marketed in Brazil, such as bottles and breast milk substitutes for mothers. We have had the collection of over 3,000 instances of this commercialization in e-commerce, and thus we signal that these people are infringing the law, and we seek out some key terms that could help this AI to seek these people out. So about 20,000 people were considered as infringing the law, and they are entered into the platform that monitors, and 15,000 of these threats were discarded, and the rest were characterized as incidents. So all companies are automatically notified so that they can exclude these irregularities from the internet, and they're monitored over time to verify if they have removed those marketing products from the internet. And we have had success with about 85% of the cases which have been solved. So it's a way to monitor that we wouldn't be able to do using human resources, but that we're using AI to carry out to optimize this action in the internet. And we know that we're still limited because we have other forms of commercial promotion that this tool is not able to identify, monitor, and notify, but we're very happy with the results achieved by this pilot project. And we also have in the regulatory agenda for this year the theme of NBCAL, which will be a great opportunity to discuss improvements when it comes to this theme within the agency. So that's it. Thank you very much. I wish everyone a great event.
Muito obrigado, Renata. Muito
Thank you
intrigante.
very much, Renata. It's very intriguing, everything you have told us. We need to explore this wonderful tool you have created. So now I'd like to invite Carlota Aquino. She's the Executive Director of the Brazilian Institute for Consumer Defense, IDEC. You have the floor, Carlota. I am very happy to be participating in this very special webinar to celebrate the World Breastfeeding Day representing IDEC. In the name of IDEC, I'd like to say hello to everyone who's in the event and holding this event, such as PAHO, UNICEF, panelists, translators, and all participants. And we are fighting to protect breastfeeding. And if you don't know about our institution, we are a consumer defense association that is independent from any political parties or governments, and we have been working for over 34 years to guarantee access to healthy food to the population and food that respects natural resources. IDEC wants to defend fairer and healthier consumer relationships, and we'd like to try and guarantee the production of healthier food. Breastfeeding is the first and most important food for children, and it should be prioritized and protected from actions, practices, and harmful products. And it's important to highlight that we are not alone. We act in partnerships. We integrate the Alliance for Appropriate Healthy Food with the protection and support to complementary healthy feeding. And one of our priority actions is the integration of Colonza. And us as IDEC fight with you to protect breastfeeding, and we have worked for years with from Brazil to denounce irregular practices.
And throughout these years, we've noticed that the laws here in Brazil for breastfeeding are constantly being disrespected by the sector. In this event here today, we congratulate OPAS with the marketing of the child formula and the exposition of the systematic and constant way that marketing has been done for these products. It's very important that everything is really surveyed and inspected so that the right to healthy feeding is provided to all children. This is a very important day today with very important people here to make forward a process that we are that we are requesting to Nestlé Brazil for having had crossed actions. So this is based on the fact that they create similarities between the can pictures and shapes and things, bringing people to confusion, really getting things wrong and causing at the end harm to the families and the children. So the colors, the type of fonts that are used, the names that they are repeated both in child formula as well as the milk products from others, and the similarity of them are to associate these two different products to stimulate the products to migrate from one product to the other. This is against NBCAL, and it can actually bring children to leave breastfeeding earlier than they would. It's also a practice that we are trying to stop at all times. It's not providing proper information. It's also going against the laws of protection to maternity and goes against the federal constitution. Within this court suit or process that we're running, these brands should stop presenting these products in cans that are similar to the other ones. Until that happens, the judicial system is requesting that an extra explanation is put in the packages, calling the attention between both products. We also request that the companies pay together an indemnification of $60 million, Brazilian reals, my apologies, and that this practice be considered as illegal. Apart from this, both Nestle, Magic Johnson, and Danone, they are not respecting the right to information, to health, security, and proper eating and the protection to maternity and the first childhood. To put two products together goes against one of WHO's recommendations for those who produce a formula, that they should separate these from their other products. The practice of cross marketing or producting, it goes against the rights of maternity and first childhood. So with that, I invite you to watch this, read our newsletter, and hope we all have a wonderful event for healthy and sustainable eating. This week, we're talking about breastfeeding. And I'd like all of you to access the website that I will be providing to you. Thank you so much, Carlota. It's also very impressive. We are very excited to see what's going to come out of this public suit so that we can come to an end of this cross advertising. Now, I'd like to invite Sanchez to speak. The floor is yours. Hi to everyone here who is connected It's very important to be here to represent IFA in Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you, everyone, the Ministry of Health in Brazil and the health surveillance and the Consumers Protective Services. As we know, and we've seen in the previous interventions, we are at the mark of the celebration of the International Day of Protection for Breastfeeding. We have very important tools here with us. We also have the study of this marketing strategy, which is anti-ethical and is abusive on part of the food industry. This is something that brings me to think about our codes and laws within our countries. The fact is that these pieces of information, documents, should they only be seen by our country, we are in a wonderful moment. Panama and Brazil are highlighted in this report because they are considered as allies to the code. Historically, Brazil was a reference in this sense, especially to South America and the Caribbean. And this work here in Brazil is very important, IFAN's work, and the constant monitoring for the rules to be really followed. Your voice, when it can be heard, what you said was very important with the Brazilian Health Ministry, which is so important. I think it was important and essential to IFA is in over 20 countries. And we're working with voluntaries and really stern, firm people who really do work and maintain the code and surveil it. At this moment, we are developing a course through a university that's allied here in South America, where many people are receiving these instructions about international codes. These instructions are given to people who are interested in supporting and promoting the code. And we are suggesting that all of this be included in the next reviews of the code. These people, they are always there. So it's necessary. And the challenge is to avoid conflicts, these conflicts which happen in our regions. And so to keep in order our health sector is very important. The health sector is just exhausted by the pandemic, where the lack of control is noticeable. Within the digital space, as mentioned before, throughout Brazil, I would say that we will be seeing all of this happening in all of South America and the Caribbean. It's also important that all the norms are in accordance to the code. The support of PAHO and WHO to really be able to face the challenges that we've seen previously, so that we can really implement and change the public laws and make them free of interests. Specific legislation to protect mothers and their babies against the abusive production and marketing of these breast milk products. This is an enormous opportunity for the countries to pay attention to each other and to get back on track to their commitment to the health of the first infancy. We will be present in all the countries of South America, running a very strong program, but it's also a very visible and noticeable program. All of us within the network wish that this event is of great use to everyone who is here connected with us. We deeply thank Brazil for your initiative. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, Clavel. Muito gosto estar com você. Muito obrigado. Então, dando seguimento à nossa sessão de boas-vindas, eu convido a Cynthia Ribeiro. Ela
Now we will have Cynthia Ribeiro, who is the coordinator of the International Network here in Brazil. The floor is yours, Cynthia, for IPFA. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to greet everyone who is here participating. I'd like to congratulate PAHO, UNICEF, and Visa, the National Sanitary Agency, the YouTube channel. It's really emotional for me to be here participating in this opening round of conversation, participating in our fight in favor of breastfeeding. This is a struggle that we've been really encompassing since the beginning in 1993. And breastfeeding is a right day after day. And it is based on scientific studies with professional studies from everybody who is helping and proper services. Promoting, supporting, and protecting the women, the families, protecting against the disinformation of the industries for bottles and pacifiers. So this year, the International Code of Children's Commercialization of Products is 40 years old this year. And now the lay that we have here in BICAL and the 256 created in 2006, which is known here as BICAL, which is the Brazilian norm for those who are breastfeeding. It results in one of the most severe and worst crimes against those who are breastfeeding. So to be here all together, being able to support these women, this really is very important because what they are doing goes against really the NBCAL. And they do have a whole set of rules so that they could regulate the practices of commercializing these products. This year, IFAM Brazil is going to continue to really make statements and talk about all the companies that are going against this, as well as new strategies such as digital marketing that go much beyond just the local place of purchase. The shops go at reaching directly everyone within their homes, the babies and the mothers. So I'd like to invite everyone to participate in this campaign. Please follow our campaign on the website and all of our social media platforms, and let's move together for this right, for the right of the baby to be fed and the right of the mother being able to feed her baby free from all interferences from the industry and free from interests. Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much. I'd like to thank everyone and your entire network as well. Now, to continue and to wrap up our welcoming round, I'd like to invite Lorena Mello. She is a technical assistant of the Ministry of Health for breastfeeding. Lorena, the floor is yours.
Bom dia a todos, a todas.
Good morning, everyone.
Falo em nome da coordenadora Janine Ginani,
I'm going to be speaking in name of
do Ministério da Saúde.
Ms. Janani. I'd like to thank everyone and this invitation for being here in name of everyone.
Essa é uma agenda que é muito cara para o Ministério da Saúde. Sabemos da importância de proteger o aleitamento materno, proteger essas mulheres que
protecting
desejam
these women who wish to breastfeed and suffer, and really
e aí pensando pela criança que não tem nem esse
people go after them
defesa,
in the industry and they don't feel they have the right to defend themselves. So I think it's very important for the civil organization society to get organized, really.
Muito importante também a manutenção da prática.
It's also very important to keep the practice of surveillance
de estar sensibilizando os profissionais
and
de saúde,
to make all the health professionals and providers really sensitive to this aspect so that we can really promote breastfeeding. The Ministry of Health is part of this work and defends the breastfeeding, and it's within our whole scope of work. And all this information and decal is going to be forwarded to everybody from all the providers in the network of the health system. And I thank everyone once again, and I wish all of you a wonderful event. Thank you so much, Lorena. Thank you for everything that you've said. And now to continue, I'd like to invite everyone who is here watching us right now that while the panelists are speaking, if you have any doubts, questions, observations, comments, you're all very much welcome to register at YouTube, and then at the end, we'll have a round of Q&A. I'd like to now present our first panelist, Dr. Lawrence Gumerstrom. He is the leader of the Nutrition Department of WHO. And he coordinates a work about children nutrition and also the lack of nutrients and micronutrients. Dr. Larry Grumerstrom, would you be able to tell us how the marketing for these child formula actually affects the decision-making on the use of these types of formula? The floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Cristiano, for that introduction, and thank you to all of our various organizations welcoming today's event. So good morning to everyone. It's wonderful to be able to share with you some of the information about some of the new reports that WHO has been publishing. I hope that some of you have seen some of this out in the media and social media, et cetera. So today's information may not be new to you, but hopefully looking at it in a little more depth might help further our conversations. We've really started this work about a year ago tomorrow with the 40th anniversary of the endorsement of the Code of Marketing of Breast Milk Substitutes. And WHO has really been trying to address a significant amount of advocacy and science to understanding different aspects of this. So today I'm going to be sharing with you the results of a couple of studies. We'll just go through them fairly quickly in the interest of time, on how the marketing of formula milk influences our decisions on infant formula, on infant feeding. And we're going to be talking about really two studies, one that was really focused on women and what their perceptions are of that marketing and how they're being influenced by it, and a second looking more at digital media as a key strategy that is being used increasingly today. So just to start off with why we focus on this issue right now, we know that commercial marketing of formula is not the only challenge that we face to breastfeeding. There are many reasons women choose not to breastfeed. Sometimes it's a preference issue. There are constraints in many countries that have to be addressed in terms of maternity protection, inadequate accommodations at the work site. We know that many women perceive that they're not having enough milk, and we don't have the kind of support to make sure that they are able to continue breastfeeding. We know that there are many societal norms in many countries that work against breastfeeding, and our healthcare systems are not set up to provide the kind of support that mothers need. And we have to address that with better education and better reimbursement for services, and a much better cadre of people who can work with mothers in their breastfeeding journeys. But we also know that one of the key barriers that is driving the lack of breastfeeding is the continued marketing of formula milk products. We've been trying to address this for 41 years now, and the problem continues to face us. I think it's important for us to recognize that in some ways, this marketing is at the heart of why we're not progressing on all of the other issues. Certainly, marketing affects mothers directly. It addresses their understanding of what are the differences between formula and breastfeeding. It sets up an equivalency as a false equivalency. It talks about benefits of formula in terms of the formula itself, or benefits in terms of lifestyle, how it's going to address many of their needs. It erodes their confidence in breastfeeding by saying, if you can breastfeed, if it's going to be possible for you, that's great, but we're here as your backup. And it establishes themselves as trusted sources. So it changes the mother's perception. But I think it's important in understanding marketing that it's not just about the mothers. It's also about all of those people around her, the kinds of supports that she's going to get from her family and her friends that make it easier to breastfeed, get eroded away when those family and friends are also hearing these messages about, well, maybe it doesn't matter so much. Maybe there are benefits to formula for you. Are you sure you can do it? Those things that make it difficult for her also are messages that they share and echo back. Healthcare providers who get messages that this isn't really so important after all, you could always just turn to formula, then why should they invest in their own education on how they can provide better support for breastfeeding? Why should schools, why should medical schools be providing that kind of education when they can get free education from formula companies? Employers, why should they be supporting breastfeeding? If they've been taught that there's an equivalency, it's just a mother's choice, she can choose what she wants to do, they come away saying, well, then why should they have a responsibility to support breastfeeding? Why should legislators invest in breastfeeding programs if it really doesn't make any real difference? And so it really is making it an uphill battle for all of us in all the ways that we try to support breastfeeding. And I think it's important that we start off understanding that we're never going to compete. Sometimes we hear messages of, well, why don't we just do a better job in telling women about the importance of breastfeeding? Why don't we come back with our own counter messaging so that they're not being totally bombarded by one side? We need to counterbalance that. And I think it's really, we really need to understand we're not going to win that battle. This is a $55 billion industry in sales every year. It's estimated that 5 to 10% of that is spent on marketing. And that kind of budget is more than double WHO's entire operating budget, just to set some kind of scale to that. Every health issue that we try to deal with on a global scale is half of what industry is spending specifically on the marketing of breast milk substitutes. We're never going to be able to compete at that level. And therefore, we have to put restrictions to stop that marketing. So we're going to be talking about two reports today, one on how the marketing of formula milk influences our decisions, and a second on digital marketing. So starting with the first one here, this report was done in 8 countries around the globe, every continent represented, all of the WHO regions. And we chose these countries on the basis of trying to get a mix of high income, middle income, low income countries, countries that have high rates of breastfeeding, low rates of breastfeeding, countries that have good alignment with the code of marketing, and those that have very poor alignment with the code of marketing. So we're really getting a cross-section of what does the world look like in terms of marketing. This was the largest study that we know of its kind. It had over 8,000 survey participants understanding women's perspectives on how they were observing this and how it changed their opinions. What were their various experiences of different types of marketing. We had in-depth discussion groups, interviews with mothers, phone diaries to track exactly what they were seeing over the course of a week, in-depth interviews with those influencers around the mothers in terms of their healthcare professionals, their family members. And we did in-depth interviews with marketing executives to really try to understand the multiple perspectives on how this marketing, excuse me, is happening. So some of the key messages that came out of this report. First of all, marketing is pervasive and it is invasive. Over half of women around the world are saying they are seeing and hearing formula milk marketing happening to them. This was supposed to be stopped 40 years ago. We've been addressing this issue and still we aren't even down to getting less than half of women exposed. In some countries, it is extremely high. China, Vietnam, United Kingdom, all showing more than 80% of mothers saying that they're being exposed to this kind of marketing. And when we look at how frequently it is, in some countries, it is extremely frequent. In these diaries that mothers filled out, in some countries, they were seeing it on a daily basis, every day, getting ads targeted at them about formula feeding. The report also showed that marketing is multifaceted. Oftentimes people think of marketing in a very simplistic way about, well, it's the promotions that we get. It's the advertisements that occur on social media or television or billboards. And that's what we're talking about in terms of marketing. And of course, that is one we're certainly concerned about. But it goes far beyond that in terms of the subtle messages that are there in labels, the sales that are given in retail environments, both online and offline retail, the kinds of relationships that these companies try to build with mothers, maybe not even talking about infant feeding specifically, but we're here on your side. We're here to work with you, that then makes them be perceived as the experts when they have questions. Gifts that are given, healthcare providers being pulled in as marketers, co-opting the science that we're focusing only on the issues around formula and not addressing issues around breastfeeding. Lobbying for weaker policies to support breastfeeding and policies that make it easier for them to sell their products, and changing international standards such as world trade agreements and codex standards so that they can move their products across borders seamlessly and make it much easier for them to sell their products. One of the themes that we saw consistently throughout all of the countries was the way that the companies are using misleading claims to make it perceive that their formula is somehow better, that it's going to improve growth, that it's going to make your baby smarter. They position their products as being equivalent or even sometimes superior to breast milk and what it provides and extra nutrients or scientific ingredients that people don't even know what those ingredients are, but they sound really cool and important. And so they must be really, really necessary for feeding my baby. And these perceptions are sometimes, or these claims are sometimes not even explicit, but they are implied in such conniving ways that they pass laws, or they pass through the laws that say, are you lying to people? Well, we're not quite lying to people, but they're giving the impression that their formula is better. Increasingly, we're seeing them focusing on allergies and sensitivities as ways to find new sales that are targeted formulas that address specific needs, that maybe your baby has this kind of problem and therefore needs our formula. Another theme was the kinds of connections and trust that they try to build with parents, building on what those mothers think are their issues themselves. So they feel vulnerable, they're feeling certain emotions about how to feed their babies, and the companies latch on to those particular concerns and address mothers directly with, we are the answer to the problem that you are raising here. Sometimes they look at it as, I want to feed the best for my baby, and I'm convinced that this is now the best for my baby. Or if I can't breastfeed, then here's what I need this particular formula. Sometimes they say that their instinct takes over, but they want to buy the most expensive formula because they're making up for what they're missing otherwise. This report is full of quotes from others as to how they saw the marketing affecting them, and it really is scary how much they are pulled in to echoing the messages of the companies and just feeling that they trust these companies and they're connected to the companies because of the kinds of advertising they've seen. They're also building on targeting health professionals. We know that health professionals are the main source of education for many families on infant feeding, and the companies across the board are using the health professionals. They're connecting with them, providing them with incentives such as commissions or making them ambassadors, funding their research, giving them gifts. As ways to connect with them. They're providing multiple contact points to answer every question that they might have about every aspect of formula, so that they become the friends. They become the trusted sources for the professionals, and then the professionals are passing on their images and their ideas on to mothers. It's a standard practice across the industry. Let me move on to the second report about digital marketing that we know is a growing issue for how this marketing is happening around the globe. For this study, we weren't surveying women on it. We were using a variety of other sources. We had a steering committee that really drove the overall effort and helped to design the report. We did a systematic review of the literature to see what's been published on the topic. We did an analysis of legislation and how it covered it. A key component of this report was a social listening research project in which we went to see what is actually happening across the media, in social media, in 17 countries, 11 languages, examining across a 6-month period, what do we actually see is happening on the internet in social media posts, talking about issues of breastfeeding, formula feeding, or specifically about the brands. We also looked at country-specific reports and the multi-country report that I just talked about for what mothers are telling us about what's going on in social media. So what were the key messages from that report? First of all, this kind of marketing is ubiquitous and has become the primary form of marketing in many countries. In that social media listening project, we found 4 million social media posts about infant feeding. Most of them specifically were talking about breastfeeding, and yet they were often originating from a BMS brand. So the industry likes to talk about breastfeeding because it makes them seem like they're on the good side, and yet they are the experts that have the information to convince mothers what to do. Many of them also came from retail sites talking about their products, and yet they're talking about breastfeeding in the context of what products they have. The reach of these posts was massive. 2.47 billion people were estimated to be reached, with a very high degree of like, share, or comment, an engagement rate that is about 10 times the high of what is normally considered to be good exposure in these campaigns. So these ads are highly effective and are being multiplied multiple times over by users. On average, a BMS brand account is reaching 40 users for every post that they put out. We also found from the study that this kind of marketing is extremely effective. It is more effective than traditional marketing. A single campaign in China drove up $2.2 million in sales just by using artificial intelligence. A campaign in Hong Kong with an app that just invited mothers to get educational content for children. So it wasn't even talking about BMS, but it was building that relationship with the companies, increased sales in breast milk substitutes by 30%. A targeting app in Indonesia that helped mothers connect to nearby shops where they could purchase BMS in person directly after engaging with the app, increased sales by 18%. They're using innovative techniques to make sure that they're turning these into sales immediately. To some degree, this is the same kind of thing that we've seen for a long time in traditional marketing space. Advertising videos that we've seen are appearing in internet sites. Print ads are now showing up, in online magazines. Internet sales that used to be in brick and mortar stores are now showing up in online stores. We see product displays, labeling, invitations to make direct contact. And particularly during the COVID years, we were seeing, or COVID years, I guess, the last couple of years, that industry was really taking advantage of the pandemic in all of these ways, using these same kinds of ads that they've done traditionally, but they're using digital media to reach out to women on their phones and in their homes with these kinds of ads. But it doesn't stop there. It goes beyond just traditional media. They're doing it in new and different ways. They're also using them to target these ads. And it's incredibly invasive the way they're using artificial intelligence to get information about mothers, to understand characteristics of the mothers themselves, but also to understand what are the needs of these mothers and turning that into timely ads. So a mother who Googles a search on how do I know if I'm producing enough breast milk can easily be turned into an ad that she's getting. And our formula is available for you if you don't have enough breast milk. And all you have to do is click here. And so we can translate that query into a purchase opportunity just instantaneously. We also see opportunities here by which they're using things that are not traditionally understood to be advertising to promote their products. So influencers who are just other women who are sharing their own life experiences, and they're not employees of the company, can sometimes be sponsored by that company or can be amplified by the company actually sharing that information and getting it out much broader than that. These influencers sometimes get kickbacks from the sales that come across their sites. Sometimes they're just sharing their own information, but the companies are taking advantage of them. The companies are putting out apps that are just ways to have fun engagements with the mothers. They're using competitions for mothers to generate their own information and share information about formula and get that multiplied, and sometimes even paying them and giving them gifts for doing so. So getting them to generate the content themselves. Baby clubs where they can use to have mothers share information among themselves and yet inadvertently are also sharing that information with companies and advancing this. So there are new strategies that are really kind of scary and how incredibly effective and invasive they are. And then we have to recognize that this kind of marketing is transnational. It reaches across national borders, even if there are laws in one country that are against it and they can stop a company from advertising in a certain way or putting in particular kinds of ads or apps. They can't stop it from happening in some other country, and it making it available across the countries. Also, the sales sometimes can operate across countries, and this makes the implementation of the code through national legislation and other instruments particularly challenging. And we're going to have to find solutions in which we can address this through regional pacts, regional trade agreements, and even international standards and conventions to really clamp down on this problem. So let me close with that and just say thank you for your attention. I want to remind us all that we're not just bystanders to this. We're not just saying this is a problem that's happening out there, isn't it too bad? But we can step up. We can change our laws. We can change the way our politicians see these issues. We can alert many others to this problem and call upon the companies to stop and create legislation to make sure that they stop. We have a global campaign called End Exploitative Marketing with this hashtag, and you can sign on to a letter calling upon them to stop this, and we'll be using that letter for further advocacy to really push on these companies, push on healthcare providers, and push on legislators to finally address this problem and make it stop after 41 years. Thank you very much for your attention today.
Muito obrigado, Dr. Lawrence. Realmente.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lawrence. And it's very impressive how aggressive and efficient the child formula industries have created these strategies to put a target in the backs of these mothers and push on them so many abusive forms of advertising that go against our international code. I'd also like to thank the brilliant effort conducted by Dr. Lawrence in the elaboration of this report and bringing a set of studies that is very important and will definitely be a landmark in our fight to defend breastfeeding. And without further ado, I'd like to thank and I'd like to encourage the audience to ask questions and to send us their questions, doubts, comments in the YouTube chat. And I'd also like to invite Dr. Marcos Arana. He's a surgeon, graduated by the National University, the Autonomous University of Mexico. He's an anthropologist, a master in public health and oncology, and in the medical, and also works in the Medical Nutrition Institute Dr. Marcos, you have the floor. And I'd also like to know how has the monitoring of the international code has fared in monitoring the its implementation, especially within the COVID-19 pandemic. Yes, definitely, I'd like to thank you for this invitation, to thank UNICEF and all other partners. I'm very happy to be here. I will now be sharing my screen and I will share a presentation.
¿Se puede ver ahora la pantalla?
Can you see my screen?
¿Se puede ver la pantalla bien? Espero que sí.
Can you really see the screen?
Voy a hablar de monitoreo de coyuntura. Este es un término que me he inventado precisamente.
I'm going to
hablar de la forma en la cual
be talking about this topic
Latina ha también hecho acciones
so that I can show that IPFA here in Latin America has also run extra actions to show everything that happens in terms of violations to the code. In this case, the pandemic.
Normales, en donde llamados normales, en los cuales
there are normal moments or moments that we determine as normal, and the instruments that we have for this monitoring are very useful, but we're living special moments where we need specific focus.
Hacer una mención a lo que está ocurriendo a nivel internacional.
I don't want to continue without mentioning what's happening in the international field, especially in the United States with this lack of formula for breast milk, which show the vulnerability of the families when they lose their sovereignty on how to feed their baby. And for sure, the substitution, which is totally inadequate about this commercialization of breast milk formula, would have avoided this crisis. I think this is a lesson that we have to learn and bring into our countries. Of course, we are trying to solve the crisis, and we are also making it easier for the importation processes, so that we can seek ways and forms of really putting this code into action where we live. We have to understand that breastfeeding is a sovereign process, and we can't allow this type of thing to happen with breastfeeding. However, the structure uses in a very opportunistic way, including the wars, so that they can promote their products and have gains.
La pandemia es por COVID-19.
The pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, presented opportunity to the companies so that they could expand their promotion and use a series of strategies which were very specific. This was the case of what happened in Paraguay. In Paraguay, and probably this repeated in other countries, but there, the companies, they promoted the fear of mothers, especially so that they would be in doubt if COVID could be transferred through the breast milk. In other words, the companies were promoting the fear with their commercialization in mind. In Mexico, on the other hand, the pandemic provided the opportunity to violate the code, but also in this case, Mexico, there was a coalition between Coca-Cola and Nestle, and in several different countries of Latin America, they went together to promote through a series of drugstores and pharmacies, which are owned by Coca-Cola, to promote formulas and brought to poor regions in Mexico, in Chiapa, Oaxaca, La Cruz, and places where they have indigenous populations as well. This was documented, and monitoring that was done by Limpa Mexico during the pandemic. What we saw was that we were registering what was happening in our countries throughout this period of confinement and fear. This was also done in recurrent situations in Latin America, which are natural disasters, weather-related events, and it was done in a very insistent way due to the lack of support that they had with donations, for example, because everything was throughout the pandemic. There were donations, but that were not requested for disastrous situations by the Mexican Red Cross, and they donated directly in a bulk way, massive way. And many of these formulas were very close to their expiry date. In many countries of the Caribbean, a situation that was very well coordinated also shows the dispositions of a company, a national company, to generate so that these companies could use the pandemic to mention, show their milk products, and change their image. So this was a very well orchestrated action because it happened simultaneously in all the countries. In each one of these countries that you see here, they had the opportunity to document in a very detailed manner what happened and how it was used, so they could have their products sold during the pandemic, making the best of the pandemic. It didn't happen only in the Caribbean, it also happened in some South American countries, basically all South American countries. And we registered how this same type of practice was repeated over and over again, a coordination between these companies in different places in each country. So they were making the best of the pandemic. And then we found many violations. And something which is not only what we're talking about here, but we have to see and notice that the code is referring to the minimum amount of actions that should be run in order to protect mothers and babies. The strategies and methods that the companies that produce these formulas, they switch them all constantly so that they can really get in the way of the discussions in the code with the purpose of documenting these strategies. The monitoring should not be limited to these types of relations and how they are distributed. The monitoring should also be done through tools of identifying the new ways that the companies have to reach out to the women and influence their decisions. And this isn't even in the code. So this way they can be identified, and this is a way that the companies are actually handling the mother's decisions about their babies. Now, reaching the end of the objective, it would be to really ban all the cooperative practices that really do shift the mother's decisions and understanding on breastfeeding and early childhood feeding. For most, this is something that is very worrying, that causes lots of fear. And for some, this might be the opportunity for a business. In this way, the wars, the disasters, the natural disasters, inflation, pandemic, everything that is so important for everyone, but for the companies, these are moments where an opportunity presents itself for business, biotechnology, the production that we've had in the last few years. This shows the behavior of the manufacturers for breast milk formulas. or substitutes and bring this to other places. They had the same opportunity in other sessions of monitoring that noticed armed conflict situations during the situation. So the wars, the effects of the global warming and the climate changes, and even things that happened within, difficulties within the production become reasons for more production, as it's been over the past 43 years. And now we see that some problems where commercial practices that are really inadequate are happening, and we are here to really speak out.
Muchas gracias, Dr. Marco Arana.
Thank you so much, Doctor. It's very worrying, the situation where we have this expansion and really disclosure, dissemination of this information in the Americas, and the role of IPFA, and also WHO, PAHU, UNICEF, for us to try to together try to eradicate everything that's going on. So I'd like now to invite Dr. Rodrigo Viana. He is the professor of the Nutrition Department of the Federal University of Paraíba. He is a member of the IBFA Brazil, and he's been working in health surveillance for children and also breastfeeding. Rodrigo, with all these different marketing strategies for the formulas, what have you been identified in the annual reports that you've been creating? And BCAL, according to BCAL, especially in the last report that you created last year. Good morning, everyone. It's an enormous pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be part of this important event and bring this very important work that the message of the work that we've been doing at IPFA over the past 40 years. It's work that is actually extremely important. I'd like to thank the words of Ms. Clavel, who really highlighted Brazil here, and the actions that we've run here in the country together with other countries, and defend that this is an international fight, as presented, as stated in this report. It's industries and manufacturers that are all over the country, the world, the globe. We have to unite. So I'm going to share our experience here in Brazil to start. I'm going to share my screen as well. Here it is. Brazil has been monitoring for a very long time, and what I bring especially here to show you today, for everyone who is here watching us today, is work that was run by the IPFA network under the coordination of Marina Hare, and had many people working with it, but especially these who I've highlighted here. It's a project that was financed by the Ministry of Health, and here you have Luciana, Fabiana, Maristela, Raquel. They all developed this monitoring throughout last year here in Brazil. It was a national monitoring. What's really important to highlight here is that, and what Renata mentioned in her opening speech, is that we have a first version of our legislation. We have a first version of regulation of marketing in Brazil in 1988. And then in the year 2001 and 2002, we had the bills or the laws from Anvisa, the sanitary agency in Brazil. And Brazil was pioneer in creating a law, federal law, in the year 2006. So the restriction, the limit of where the propaganda can reach for these products is foreseen for in the law in Brazil. And this was first regulated in 2015, and the current one is from 2018. So NBCal really does cover the food that substitutes breast milk, apart from everything from 0 to 36 months, apart from bottles and nipples and pacifiers and the nipple protectors. Here in Brazil, we run the monitoring. And so the monitoring of all of these advertisements, the labels, ever since '83. So this action now that the network IBFA has been running, it's almost 40 years that's been, I've been with them for 39 years, and yearly we have the monitoring. In 2006, we were able to monitor, have a national monitoring system together with Anvisa, the National Sanitary Agency, and that was very important. We had together with the monitoring, the register, and the possibility of really being able to report. And then from 2014, we count with the participation of IDEC, which is here with us, the Institute in Defense of the Consumer, and this very pioneering historical promotion and looking into the legal practices of publicity for this type of food product. Now, last year, I think, which is most important, which of everything that I'm bringing to you today, the IBFA network was able to run an educational program online, kind of like the remote learning, about the NBCal monitoring. So it was called Learning to Monitor. That was the name of it. There was the participation of 115 municipalities in 18 Brazilian states, most of them in the federal district, but we were able to englobe the 5 regions. Because Brazil is a continental country, it is really hard to really run national monitorings, but we've done it several times. There was the involvement of over 115 people. Amongst them, there we had managers, we had people from the health surveillance. So this was a pioneer educational program. And the monitoring was done in all of its steps, the collection of information, selection of them, the reporting, and sending these reports to the regulatory agencies. Not only did we do this, but we also forwarded the report itself. Now here is what it looked like. This is the web page, how it looks. It was really pretty. It didn't look beautiful. So it was the one learning to make the most out of the law, applying the law. Now, when we talk about monitoring itself, the commercial spots were visited. Technical material that is produced, educational material by the industries as well, were monitored. Also, the means of communication, their social media, for example, the labeling of the food, the labeling of bottles, pacifiers, and nipples, and also the monitoring of the health services. This is a type of monitoring that is very complex to be done. and the results. Last year, we observed in the monitoring of 2021, the red number is that you see is not the year, okay? It's the number of violations that we observed. We observed 2,269 violations. And out of these, the main one was of inadequate commercial promotion. This is very, very common. It's allowed to have commercial promotion, but it's not allowed for it to be inadequate without all the warnings that actually should be there, right? And an expressive amount of commercial promotion of products that is prohibited. And this is something that we didn't see, we hadn't seen in a long time. And now we have this again, which are the bottles, the nipples, the pacifiers, and the formulas for newborns. So problems with the labeling, publications that were done totally inadequate to our legislation, and practices from the health professionals as well, such as receiving donations, gifts, and the labeling that is inadequate in the health units, clinics. An important thing that is important, the comparison between the media, digital media, and commercial promotion at the spots of sale, we observe that there is a difference in the type of infraction, of proposition. So, meanwhile, where you see the health stations with where you have the sales, we see most of the commercial promotion is really inadequate of those products that are allowed. We saw about 60% of violations, and a little bit less of 35% where the products are totally prohibited. In the internet, it was the opposite. So over 60% of the commercial promotion and violations were of products that the commercial promotion is absolutely forbidden. So the digital means, the network, internet, digital commerce just felt free to occupy a space that is absolutely prohibited just due to the lack of control and a bit of a smaller percentage of other types.
And now just to conclude, and I will not go into detail here for the over 2,000 instances, because we wouldn't have time to talk about all of them, but this experience was very important. And the first conclusion is that it is possible and it is feasible to do online training, and this allows for an increase in the scope of the trainings in different territories. Therefore, this is feasible, and INFAN was very successful in doing this. The second conclusion is a sad one, considering that Brazil has a legislation, we have the provisions in the law, and we have a history of monitoring, and we found infractions in all municipalities visited, all of them, and all kinds of infractions. So this means that people are either not aware of the law, or even worse, a very serious disregard for the law. And thus I have to highlight the recurring infractions for products that were absolutely prohibited from being advertised. So This was a very striking aspect of the monitoring we carried out last year, how recurrent these types of advertising were. And it is highly important that the competent authorities, such as the Health Ministry, Anvisa, the professional councils, take ownership of these results and for them to take the necessary measures. And lastly, it's not enough to monitor. It's not enough to just recognize this problem. These infractions need to be dealt with as the disregard for the law and infractions and law infractions that should be punished and should be sorted out and sanctions should be applied. And that's my message. That's what I had to say. And that's what I wanted to bring for this very rich debate we're having here. That's our experience. And I hope we can always be together and united with our partner countries, our partner entities in this important fight. Thank you very much. We thank you, Rodrigo. It's a pleasure hearing you speak about the advances in monitoring. And it's impressive. We're always very interested in hearing this type of presentation. I'm sorry, but my daughter is a bit sick here and I got a bit distracted and I skipped the video that Dr. Mako Zanana was going to show. So we will now be showing the video, please.
"82 years ago, in the context of the Second World War,
80.
Se eu não me engano, o vídeo travou.
If I'm not mistaken, the video is paused. Just a second while we try to find out why. We're having a bit of technical difficulties.
Peraí, eu tenho uma surpresa pra você. Uma surpresa lá no meu canal.
Enquanto a gente espera aí a produção do vídeo, tem a participação especial aqui. Você quer vir falar, Pedro?
We have a special participant here. It's my daughter.
Oi?
Hello.
Bom, então, enquanto a gente...
Well, so while we try to sort out the video,
¿Se podría utilizar el tiempo para comentarios?
Sí.
Perhaps we can open for comments. Yes, if you'd like to make any comment about the video, Marcos, while we try to fix this problem. Yes, it would be a pleasure. Well, this is a small video that shows a little bit about the history of the International Code, and it is a very simple video that can be used in celebrating the approval of the code, and it talks about several situations where we were able to identify the need for an instrument that would defend mothers. And obviously, it also talks about their voice and their agency and of many important actors that were present in this discussion. And this video is also a case study about the creation of this international network and how this network was developed, since it is an action that had such important merits, and it's a process that is in constant updating through monitoring, through the introduction of new strategies by companies, and how the market is changing and becoming more sophisticated. And so the code becomes more sophisticated, also dealing with the online marketing, which is something that was not imagined before. This code was approved in 91. And the video also talks about this vision of groups that want to always be updated and to bring solutions, health solutions, so that we can have discussions and situations that are current and are represented in the code. And we wanted this to be a code that brings together all actors that are engaged in the sector. Therefore, we show several experiences and solutions, also on other themes such as HIV and themes that appeared after the year of 91. And now we're working with responses that will probably be adopted by the WHO and are currently being discussed, and also highlighting solutions dealing with online marketing and commerce, which is a legislation that is limited in many countries. So is it possible to show the video? Perhaps we can show it in the end, however you prefer to, because we will be solving the technical problems. But it's a pleasure to be able to hear from Dr. Marcos, and we also shared the link for the video in our screen, in our YouTube transmission. We will show it later. And now I'm getting back to Portuguese, and I'd like to ask our panelist, Cristina Albuquerque, to talk about the launch of the online marketing of formulas report in Portuguese. And she'll tell us more about this news. Thank you. I couldn't miss this opportunity to say that such an important report will now be available to everyone. So the good news is that the report about how the marketing of breast milk formulas influence our decisions on child feeding is now made available in the PAHO website, and you will be able to find it there in Portuguese for download. And I wish everyone a good read. It's a very interesting report because it is filled with evidence, and it's a very important read. It also lists the main recommendations and findings, and it's for everyone who really believe and advocate for women's and children's rights when it comes to breastfeeding. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Cristina. It's also very important for us to be able to widen the access and provide access to Portuguese-speaking countries, not only Brazil, other Portuguese-speaking countries. So I'd like to now pass onto the Q&A session, we have a few questions that were sent and also a few comments, especially thanking Jerus Amaral says that we need to protect pregnant women and babies. Pregnancy is a very sensitive moment where women need a support network to overcome every difficulty. Dr. Fernandes thanks everyone for the opportunity to have this meeting and to disseminate knowledge. And Renata from Anvisa asks about the monitoring of irregularly sold products via e-commerce. And I'd like to ask this question to Renata from Anvisa. How can we monitor these types of products? Because when we find an infraction in commercial establishments, such as pharmacies or supermarkets, we can resort to the Public Prosecution Service and our local networks. But when the monitoring is being done in online platforms, what can we do, Renata?
Temos uma outra.
We have another question here that I will ask Rodrigo while Renata will be getting back to answer our previous question. Rodrigo Viana, do we have a law in Brazil that prohibits nutritional and health statements that list nutritional properties for formulas, for modified formulas for children from 0 to 35 months? That's a great question. And yes, it is forbidden to make health statements in the labels of products from 0 to 35 months of age. That's not allowed. And it cannot be said that this product serves this purpose. So what industries do and how they get around that is by saying this is a hydrolyzed high protein food, but it cannot say this product serves such and such purpose. That's forbidden. But there's what's written in the law, and there's what the strategies that the companies use to get around it. And making a few statements that can sort of imply these things. So monitoring always needs to be aware of this, and we always need to monitor these strategies, but it's forbidden. That's a fact. Thank you so much, Rodrigo, for your very objective and clear answer. And we have a question for Dr. Lawrence Grimistro. And I will share a question by Rena Bacha, and I will speak in Portuguese, and I think Dr. Lawrence will get the translation. And clearly, breastfeeding is the best option, but how can we limit the use of artificial milk or end it completely? Or how can we deal with this when a lot of the time we don't have other options? The question is in English. I will read it in English as well.
But how do we limit the use of artificial milk or do away with it when sometimes we have no other options?
Thank you, Cristiano, for for the question there. So I don't think that, first of all, we're not really in a world of eliminating yet. I think that this can be a long-term goal we might work toward, but I don't think that's really where we're trying to focus. I think the first thing we need to be looking at is, let's address the second half of your question. Why are there all of these reasons that make it so hard to breastfeed? And we need to address those. And I think that that's a key part of the strategies we need to be working on to make sure that women can breastfeed. Let's get the barriers out of the way. And we know that the marketing is one of those barriers, but we also know that the education of healthcare professionals, the lack of time that they spend is a critical aspect of that, the conflicts of interest that they're engaged in, the lack of maternity protection. Those are significant issues that real women face, and we should not be criticizing women for the choices that they make in the environments that they're in. We have to change those environments. I think that's a critical aspect. We have to be addressing these barriers. So what we need to be focusing on all of that to bring down the use of formula. In the foreseeable future, I think that we're going to always have a need for formula for some women. We want to keep minimizing that as much as possible. At some point, I would envision a world in which we actually could be looking to donor human milk as an alternative. I don't think that the volume is at all feasible where we are right now, but if we can get long maternity leave, we can get accommodations for women, we can address the lack of support in the workplace, in the healthcare. I think it is a future that we could eventually get to. But right now, we're not trying to eliminate the formula. We're trying to minimize its use by addressing all of these barriers.
Perfeito, Dr. Lawrence. Muito obrigado.
Perfect, Dr. Lawrence. Thank you very much. So we have Renata back with us, and I will ask the question again. How can we deal with the infractions in the marketing and e-commerce in Brazil? Who do we resort to? And who can we denounce these instances when it comes to e-commerce? Well, first of all, we need to be aware of the legal provisions. E-commerce and e-commerce advertising is under the scope of Decree 986 and also the law NBCAL, as it is referred here in Brazil. And the competency for the inspection of the national system in both in commercial stores and in e-commerce, we have this competency for the national system of surveillance, of sanitary surveillance. So SNBS, our system, has the competency to monitor and provide sanctions for advertising both in physical stores and online, but it is of course difficult to monitor e-commerce, and sometimes municipalities and states are not used to dealing with this type of commerce. And we also have online marketing, which is very hard to monitor. And a good news is that this year we will also be promoting within the National Sanitary Surveillance System a webinar for e-commerce monitoring, where we address the competencies of the system and the forms of providing sanctions depending on the actor that is related, because there is a specific way to deal with each sector. But to conclude, regardless of the way that is done, everyone who is considered as an infractor is subject to the penalty foreseen by law, and they will incur in the infringement of the law also when doing prohibited labeling and other rules related to health, and this can involve notices and the withdrawing of licenses and other penalties. But in the end, the system is competent to act when it comes to e-commerce.
Perfect. I think this also goes ahead and answers the next question. Which are the Brazilian dispositions for the companies that have really gone against the law? And what are the penalties and fees that are applied for them? I also have a personal question from Dr. Marcos Arana to Marcos Arana. Marcos, what do you think we can do? When I say we, I'm thinking IPFAN, the Health Ministry, us, civil society, friends, social influencers, digital influencers, and so a whole other group of people. What can we do so that we can make the best of the launch of this study, of this report that is so broad and comprehensive from WHO, that is actually exposing how digital marketing and the industry are working for the manufacturing of the breast milk substitutes are working? How can we react to all of this? Thank you very much, but I believe that disclosing the results from the monitoring would be important to convert them into accessible messages so that the students and all the groups, the consuming groups that know us, everybody be tied up in a network with strategies that could change the actions of these companies. I believe that the disclosure of information is not the only thing that we are to do. I think we need a communication strategy as well, even including a social network and having the monitoring, which has been shown throughout history, that it was the civil society, the general population, that when they have a topic which they think is important, they pay attention. And when there is something that hasn't for a very long been mentioned, if it's not done with the general population, it's a problem. If you don't solve it in an activist way, of course, you have to have the basis of then, of course, the investigators and those who work with this. So it's a mechanism that we use so that we can convert the different solutions for the population and convert it also into a commercial strategy so that it can be a solution and not a problem anymore. And this opportunity that all the companies have taken, and so that we can also speak to them so that they can also make better decisions, and we can work on breastfeeding. We know that there are many changes every day. We know more women have difficulties with the lactation process, with breastfeeding. This is the English interpreter. I believe Ms. Cristiano is speaking on mute, so I can't hear him.
Cristiano, you're on mute.
Perdão. Então, para fazer os comentários finais do nosso webinar.
So for our last final comments of our webinar, I'd like to invite here the nutritionist from the Columbia University. He's also a researcher of Educar Consumers and also a member of IPFA Colombia, Dr. Ruben, with us. The floor is yours. Hello, everyone. Everyone, to all of you who are here following us from all over Latin America. And I'd like to share a little bit of the experience that we have here in Colombia. And I'd like to thank this network with Brazil and WHO and everyone who was invited to this event. What has to be said is that unfortunately in Colombia, the situation is very similar to all the other countries. And we've been seeing this corporative policy is very similar all over the world, and it's similar here in our region as well. And in Colombia, we have only taken to the practice of the exclusive breastfeeding has only been brought to 10% in the past 10 years. And currently, only 3 of every 10 babies are exclusively breastfed. So this is in contrast with something that we have already seen in Colombia, that we've done in a very experimental manner from our experiences to compare the breastfeeding with the formulas. And then we started seeing that throughout the same 10 years where the breastfeeding dropped 10 points, the formulas grow 29%. So now with this report from WHO and UNICEF, where we see the size of the market for formulas around the world, we see that this is a global trend and it's repeated all over. And I think it's a wonderful way for us to start with our work in the political sciences so that we can work on defending the rights of these children and these mothers in such an important moment in their lives, also with the state working together, as well as, for sure, the improper commercialization of these formulas. And of course, it does violate the rights of the women to breastfeed and of the children. And so the women with their own milk be able to feed their children. And also this does affect the integrity of the families, because this information is not only the decision of the women, it's also made by the men, the grandmothers, and it ends in converting in just a hostile space for the woman to practice breastfeeding. So I'd like to take this opportunity and say that here in Colombia, we have the exact same scenario that we've been monitoring. And we had in the year of 2021, we really understood the amount and the size of this invasion that we had here in our country. And some of this was favored by a legislation that this year we are celebrating 30 years of. It's a very old legislation. It did not include the solutions of the situations that we see today. And of course, we need to strengthen that here in our country. And I believe that with the light that was shined on throughout this report, I think we will be able to continue working when thinking of joint actions and working together with these industries in a unified way around the world. I think we would get success. I'd like to thank everyone for this opportunity. We're here in Colombia really paying attention to any initiative on this topic so that we can protect the rights of the kids and the mothers. Thank you so much, Ruben. A warm welcome to everyone in Colombia. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Rodrigo Viana for final remarks so that we can read, because we're reaching the end of the webinar. Mr. Rodrigo.
Muito bem. Agradeço muito.
I'd like to really think this moment. It's a very important moment, an essential webinar this was. And we're bringing a message, which I'll read to everyone. Considering the recommendations from WHO and the code for the substitutes of breast milk and all the decisions of the WHO, plus the recommendations from the IPFAM network that's been working for over 40 years in the protection of mothers and children, working on the improper substitutes for breast milk. With this done in several different countries through organizations and non-governmental organizations, considering that many countries have not taken on proper measures to control publicity according to the code and the subsequent consequences. And with all the efforts that have been done, even with all these efforts, the growth of the substitutes for breast milk is just growing and growing and growing, and they are using new marketing strategies which are quite aggressive and non-regulated to disinform and or persuade the mothers to buy and use their products regardless of breastfeeding or actually leaving behind breastfeeding. This is why we are making a general call to everyone. So make your voices heard, your demands heard, so that you can demand that your country adopts and applies specific legislation to protect mothers and their babies against the abusive commercialization of products that substitute breast milk destined for babies from 0 to 36 months of age. May your countries create and implement specific rules for the control of digital marketing for the promotion and sale of products that substitute breast milk, including bottles, pacifiers, and nipples. And the definitions of the food codes, sanitary codes be followed, and also the posterior decisions of WHO whenever we talk about products that are destined for feeding children. And also proper measures be taken to guarantee the creation of public policies for health and nutrition, and this be done free of commercial interest in it, intentions. May all the health providers adopt, disclose, and implement efficient measures to avoid that conflict of interest may influence their recommendations, and keep the development of recommendations, free recommendations which are independent, be promoted. May your countries, with or without laws, defend the implementation of the initiative, the hospital front of the children, according to the 10 steps of this initiative. May the scientific knowledge be created and disclosed free of conflict, and provide evidence that is precise and impartial about the health of women, parents, and their children. And may the laws of the country support and promote the monitoring of the code and their posterior resolutions by WHO, analyzing and qualifying the reports of violation, and imposing sanctions whenever there is a broken rule against the improper commercialization for products that are destined for lactants and little children. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rodrigo. It's really important for us to have this moment of reflection and thinking about how we are going to put these actions into motion, and that together we can actually make a difference. So now we have a final surprise moment in our webinar. And I'd like to call and present our very special Patty Randall. She is of our global group, and she will give our final words, and then we will continue to really the final words and closing.
Well, that is really, really kind of you, but it's been wonderful, and I've only heard the whole of things, but I'm so impressed with the presentations. It's fantastic. It was great to hear Larry as well talking about all the problems. One of the things that we're focusing on, we're getting our team ready to go to the World Health Assembly now. We'd love it if someone from Brazil was with us, but we can only take 4. And we're going to be trying to sort of encourage member states to think about the wider issues of the global exports and the codex, all these different trading pressures that are on countries that minimize what they can do or what they feel they can do. So we hope that we can get something in the decision at WHO to actually remind countries to do something about codex and make sure. I know Brazil has been fabulous, and Ecuador and so many of the countries in your region have really been helpful. So we really need that, because I think it's a pressure that is forgotten. And also the whole business about, it's not just breast milk substitutes, it's the whole thing that comes around it. So now you have the maternal milks and you have all these other products floating around and the feeding products. So we're really pleased that the code and the resolutions and can actually cover all these things and close off those avenues. But I think it's wonderful to have such a vibrant region of the world now. I'm just thrilled that so many countries in your region are really stepping up. Hope it's just not too late and that we can actually do something to turn this round, because the digital marketing is absolutely horrendous, as Larry was saying, and the others. It really is bad. But maybe we need to just think of imaginative ways to close down that, and particularly to get the large exporting countries to take their responsibility seriously. There are really big, powerful countries that are siding with industry and pressurizing weaker countries to accept unnecessary, sweet-tasting, flavored products that are ultra-processed, doing the children no good at all. So thanks very much for inviting me, Christian. I wasn't expecting that, but really good. Really lovely to see everybody there. Thank you very, very much. Marvelous. And we will be using all those 4 reports, all the 4 reports at WHO. We're really delighted with it. It's really great. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the last minute participation. Obrigado. Então, eu gostaria muito de agradecer a todos.
I'd really like to thank everyone for all of those who have followed us up to here. It's a very important moment. I'd really like to thank as well PAHO, WHO, here in Brazil as well, all the technicians and all the professionals involved in the production of this webinar and its organization as well. And I'd like to thank everyone, all the directors, coordinators, and authorities who have been present throughout the opening moments. I'd also like to thank especially our panelists today, Marcos Arana, Lawrence Grimstrong, Rodrigo Viana. Everybody's participation was absolutely excellent, and this will be registered in history, all this participation, so that we can continue fighting the good fight and doing this and changing the reality of the world. I invite everyone to watch now the video that was produced by Professor Marcos Arana, which we could not show before due to technical issues. And after it's shown, we will wrap up our webinar. And here is the registration of the history of this webinar. Thank you, everyone.
sin sonido.
This is the Portuguese interpreter. There is no audio. And it's in English, in Spanish that it's written.